Thanks for joining us, everybody. We're glad that you could spend a little time with us this afternoon. We're gonna, as you've probably noticed on our website, there've been a number of updates and changes to the training protocol page. So we're gonna go through some of those changes today and kind of give you some of the background of why we made those adjustments, what research, especially the research that Tyler helped us with to be able to really optimize some of those different pieces. And that's what we're really going to go through today. For those of you who don't know, I'm Mike Napoleon. I'm one of the founders of SuperSpeed. Kyle Shea is also on here. He's going to be moderating, our other founder. And then Dr. Tyler Standiford's a professor of biomechanics at Utah Valley University. He's been doing a lot of research on our products and the training protocols and really trying to find some ways to optimize everything that we do here at SuperSpeed. So we're really excited to have him with us here today on this webinar as well. As we go through today, please go ahead and hit some questions in the chat pane or the Q&A pane. Kyle's going to be taking notes of those. We don't have a terribly long presentation on this. We really want to get this to be more interactive and answer the questions that you might have about the changes to the protocols. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we're going to get started. Kyle, you're going to have to let me share my screen. All right, and we'll go through a little bit of information. And like I said, we really just want to be able to answer as many of your questions as we possibly can. So, looking at speed training in a very specific way, this is mostly, a neurological training program. This is training that's all about getting your brain to expect a faster result when you make a golf swing. And, we've talked about in many of our other webinars and all of the other videos and things that are online, about a lot of the science behind that with motor units and how motor programs kind of start in our brain and signals go through our body and our muscles respond with those motions. And I think that's a really important factor because this is the backbone of everything that happens when we deal with overspeed training at SuperSpeed. And this training, this neurological training, is different than if we were in the gym trying to get stronger or, in many ways build muscle or even increase range of motion. In a lot of ways, this is a very different kind of training. And it all kind of hits the back end of overspeed training, which is really just all about making the player's body move faster than normal during something it already knows how to do in order to reset, what that expected reaction speed is to the golf swing. And, in a really simple way to put this is that when you step out on the first tee and you grab your driver and you're going to make a swing, you have a lot of history, a lot of memory. Your brain is expecting a very specific motion from your body. And if we can actually start to create a faster expectation, or the expectation that the muscles are going to move faster, that we're going to make a faster swing, we can start to change that and create really fast, quick results in increasing your swing speed. And I'll let Tyler pipe in here whenever he wants to, but a couple things that I think are really important when we start looking at speed training, and this is one that I think people sometimes don't understand right away. I'd say one of the most common things that we see is that, wow, okay, I've gotten some gains. Am I going to get more gains if I do this every day of the week? And the answer is no. This is all about, quality over quantity in some ways. We really want to make sure that every single swing that we do during a speed training session is maxed out. And that's key. And I think this is something where our previous protocols, we may have had a few too many reps in there in some of the later protocols in order to really allow that player to create maxed out speeds. They're just getting fatigued, and we've made some adjustments there. We like to say less is more on this too. Like, I would rather somebody do this training less often with less reps and make sure that each one of those reps is maxed out than do the training every day and just kind of go through the motions and slow down. Because that kind of fits into the last piece here is that, if you're not training fast, if your swing is not moving faster than normal during this speed training, you're not really training speed. So it's all about training fast to get fast. So if you ever see those speeds slow down during the training session, that's kind of the time where you need to stop in that specific session.
I think that's such a good point on that one, Mike. I've always loved the idea of like swinging fast to get fast, because I think it's a principle that holds true in every sport. But I think it's something that people don't understand quite as much as they should. And I think running is the perfect example of people who train for running, and they train at the same pace every single day and then wonder why they never get faster. And it's because they're not actually stressing the system in a way that's allowing them to develop the speeds. And so I really think that last component of kind of all those things fitting together, when we're doing this training, the intent always has to be max speed, max speed, max speed.
Yeah. So Tyler did a big research study for us in the summer this year to look at ways to optimize, the training protocols, and that resulted with a few changes that we're really excited about. What I've got up here for you now is our new training cycle outline, and I think this is really key, because this actually is from feedback from users over the last 5-6 years. This is a lot of what people actually did with our programs. Our training protocols before, we just had a recommendation of kind of going straight through, even though we didn't find that most people did that. Most people did not just start speed training and never stop. Like, they would take breaks in those processes. They would take periods where they might not do quite as much. And we've just kind of really put it down on paper, if you will, to optimize how you would do this. Now, the protocols have changed a little bit too, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think the most important piece here is how many weeks you're going to do different protocols, and how many weeks you're going to do these in what we would call a primary training phase versus a maintenance phase. I think you can look at these training cycles as, even as an entire season of your golf life. It could be less than that. You could go through multiple training cycles in a year, but a lot of people are going to go through that like intensive period of training we call a primary training phase. That's where we train 3 days a week and really push it to get those big speed jumps. And then we're going to move into more of a maintenance phase where we can back off how often we do the training and still maintain all of the gains that we have gotten through that primary training phase. Now, it used to be that we would recommend 6 weeks for level 1 and then 8 weeks for level 2. And we didn't really have that maintenance phase programmed in. So that's kind of the biggest change here that we think is really important. We also, changed the length of what we think a primary training phase should be to a period of about 10 weeks. And Tyler, you can kind of talk about some of the background there.
Yeah, and that was a lot of that was coming from the work I did in the summer, where when I sent people out after they'd been in my lab to get some baseline swing speeds and ground reaction force measurements, I tried to keep track of them in terms of how many sessions of speed training they did and how many weeks they did. If because of scheduling conflicts, I maybe had some people come in at 8 weeks instead of 6 weeks, or 10 weeks instead of 6 weeks, or something like that. And it seemed like those ones that had the very best benefit, meaning they had got into a place where they weren't getting that speed jump anymore, where like a session wouldn't raise their swing speeds, seemed like those were people that were getting to about 24-ish sessions. And so that would be, 3 times a week at 8 weeks. And it just seemed like pushing them just a little bit further allowed them to reach that plateau that I think you guys described really well in your first cycles. And I think sometimes maybe that plateau was missed if I did 6 weeks and then didn't go to level 2, or missed 4 or 5 sessions in the 6 weeks. And so I think pushing it to the 10 weeks, it makes sure that we're going to hit that plateau for all the golfers.
Yeah, and what Tyler's talking about with that plateau, I think, is really important. Like, when you start this training, if you were to measure before and after speeds, you're going to see a significant jump in swing speed after the first session. And as you would go, if you measure that data every session over the course of time, you're going to see that the starting speed kind of gradually creeps up, and then the end or after speed is going to be pretty much the same. And there's going to be a point where that before and after speed are almost the same. That's where we would consider that you've reached a point of permanency for your first speed gain. And honestly, like, over time, we've seen people reach that point of permanency in as short as 5 or 6 weeks. And what we really found with Tyler over the summer is that there's some players that it it took more like 8 to 9 weeks. So we feel like that 10-week recommendation for that first primary training phase just covers all bases for players and makes sure that we get to a good, stable point of permanency for the first speed jump in that point. And
Yeah, and
then,
I do think, Mike, just real quick right there, Mike, I do think if you're one of those players that did maybe reach that, maintenance or plateau after 5 or 6 weeks, guess what? There's not going to be any detriment to going another 3 or 4 weeks. And in fact, what may happen is that ceiling may be raised even more by going those 10 weeks.
we just want to make sure that everybody gets to that good point of permanency in that first primary training phase. And then we think it is very important to put in that maintenance phase where we're going to back off the training to once a week and do that for at least 4 weeks. I mean, this is going to be kind of a recovery time for the body. It's also going to prepare us a little bit to get into the more advanced protocols and get another big speed jump coming in that second training cycle. Now, we say 4+ weeks on that maintenance phase. What that means is that maintenance phase could be extended. In fact, we have a lot of players that go through an intense primary training phase and then on maintenance phase for months, for most of the golf season, and then ramp up and go into the next primary training phase during that next off season. So that's also a very common way to do it. So 4 weeks minimum, but there really is no maximum on that maintenance phase in the first training cycle. And then as we move into that second training cycle, again, we're going to start to move into a point where we really want to push it, get used to the training again, and then really start to get another speed jump.
Yeah,
and that's why. Yeah.
I would just say I really like the idea of this maintenance of 1 time a week. There's a lot of really good research out there about how to periodize training, including speed training. And all of that research kind of points to, you can maintain these speeds if you can do that speed training, maybe every 7 to 10 days. And so getting that once a week time period, I think, is so important for players, as opposed to, hey, I just did this speed training for a 15-week off season, 10-week, and now all of a sudden, well, gosh, I'm getting in my golf season, I don't have as much time. The last thing we want them to do is put away the speed sticks and just say, okay, I'm not focused on speed anymore, I'm going to just go into my golf game, when all they need to give is the 15-20 minutes once a week, and they would maintain all of those speed benefits that they had just built up in those 10 weeks.
Yep, absolutely. So moving in out of that maintenance phase. So when you're in a maintenance phase, you're doing the level 2 protocol once a week. What we would recommend when you're ready to get into that second training cycle is we're going to move back to the 3 days a week. Stay with the level 2 protocol though, but kind of spend 2 weeks kind of ramping up, getting ready to really push it into the next primary training phase, where we're going to move into that level 3 protocol and level 4 protocol. Again, a 10-week primary training phase. And then we'll back down. The level 3 protocol, the way we've designed this, we really feel like that's kind of the best, most stable protocol to do in maintenance phases after you get past that initial point into that second and third cycle. Because we really tried to make the level 4 and 5 protocols a little more advanced and pushing the envelope in some different ways. Incorporating some of the drills from our old ASD protocols and things like that. So level 3 is where we'll go for maintenance in the second and third cycles. But level 3 and 4 for that primary training phase, the same thing happens. We're going to go into a maintenance phase after that. That can last 4 weeks to a whole season. And then same thing, we're going to move into the third cycle, ramp up with the 3 days a week again, primary training phase, level 4 and 5, and then go into that maintenance phase again in level 3. So that's kind of the big picture of what we're seeing as best practices on how to use these protocols, how to organize your training. And we're really excited about this. We think it's going to help people get even bigger gains than they're already getting with SuperSpeed. Okay, so the training protocols. So a couple things that we did differently in our training protocols that I think are going to make them really more effective for everyone. Number one is we reduced the number of reps in the later protocols to 3. We felt like, especially when you started to get into the level 4 and 5 protocols before, there were just simply too many reps in those protocols for people to be able to max out every swing. It was just a little bit too fatiguing for, everybody, even professional athletes. So we set all of our rep ranges to on all the drills to 3, which I think is just a really, really good change. We also added rest periods into the training protocol. So if you watch the new videos, before you get to the red club, every single time in every series or drill position, you're going to be asked to do a 60 to 90-second rest. Now, we placed it there for a couple reasons. Number one, that number of swings was about where we would see players being able to continue and create a max out speed. And then we also always saw fatigue affect the red club the most, just because with a little bit more resistance, it's a little heavier. We felt like as if players could take that little break before the red club, they were able to get back in and max out those red club swings even better. Tyler, you want to, you kind of mentioned.
Yeah, for sure. And I like that. And I think as Mike described this, right, these were things that we were seeing users use anyway in their kind of own training, where it was that they were putting in some of these rest periods already. And so I think if you can, well, and this really was actually from stuff I did specifically in my lab, where I looked at what would be the very best way to tell, you know, all the users of SuperSpeed where would be the best place to put that rest. And from the work that I did on that red club, a lot of players, in fact, the vast majority of them, when they took that 60 to 90-second rest, were getting about a 6 to 7 mile per hour jump in the red club. And so I think that's just a nice systematic way to put it in there. Do keep in mind that this is the heavy club. So as we describe the red club, we are talking about our men's set. On those other sets, this is going to be the heaviest club in your set. So potentially for some, that will be the blue club. So the rest is always before that heaviest club. And I think that's going to help us, and it's going to help the majority of our users to be able to make sure they're maxing out those speeds prior to the heaviest club.
Yeah. And then, as I mentioned before, some of the drill positions in the protocols have changed. Couple key ones to note: we took out the kneeling swings in the level 2 protocol, not because we think it's a bad drill, mainly because it's just a difficult position for people to get into on a broad scale, and we felt like we could actually get better or the same or better results with doing some slightly modified drill positions there. So we just kind of made the protocol easier. I still am a big fan of kneeling swings, but just from a general sense, we can do the same things with some other protocols. And then we also, like I said, we added in our level 4 protocol. We took a really cool drill that we used to do in our ASD 3 protocol called our sprint drill. It's really a translation drill for the upper body segments, mainly trying to really work on lag and wrist mechanics in an optimal way. And so we put that into our level 4, which we're really excited about. So check that one out as well. Okay, I want to get on now because we also completely redid all of our SuperSpeed C protocols. These are all protocols that are very much based on trying to get a translation of rotational speed from the body to the hands and arms and out to the club head. For those of you that have used the SuperSpeed C, it's extremely counterweighted, and it kind of dynamically allows there to be less resistance for the club to release around impact. So it really benefits and works on hand and arm speed. We've organized these protocols into very similar cycles, just like with the normal overspeed training. Now, there's only 3 protocols for the SuperSpeed C. They follow the same pattern, where we're going to have a primary training phase and then a maintenance phase. These drills have changed significantly from before. So we had a lot of different kneeling and half kneeling positions in these before, which we just found were too hard for most people to do and do effectively. So we really worked on finding drills that were going to do the exact same thing, or do similar type things for the body as those kneeling positions without having to do that. We do this with drills like horizontal swings, narrow stance swings, a lot of destabilizing the lower body in order to force effort into the upper body segments. So definitely check out the SuperSpeed C protocols as well. I think we're really excited about those. I think they're really gonna kind of take that whole training system with the SuperSpeed C to the next level.
And I think,
Okay.
Mike, I may jump in there just with that SuperSpeed C, and that's kind of where I'm starting to move a little bit of my research now and hope to do more in the future. I've done a lot with the 3-club system. I think as we look at that SuperSpeed C club, a common question that we get a lot is, well, how do we incorporate that into the 3-club system if we want to use both of them?
Mhm.
And I think it's important to note that they are targeting different parts of what we describe as the speed pyramid, where the 3-club system might be more focused on the ground force production. We've seen some incredible results that we're getting ready to submit to a journal right now, and some of the rotational sequencing of kind of the pelvis and trunk. Whereas the C club, as Mike described already, is really focusing on those arms and hands. So again, in an ideal world, I would love to bring everyone into my lab, put them on my force plates with my 3D motion capture system and see exactly where their speed is leaking out. But because that's not possible, I think there is a lot of opportunities to incorporate that SuperSpeed C club. And I think it could look something like, 2 days a week of the 3-club system and 1 day a week with the SuperSpeed C. I do think it's important that if you do that, you do make sure that you make it through those full 10 weeks. That way you're getting a good number of training with both the 3-club system and with that SuperSpeed C club as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that's the whole reason we developed the SuperSpeed C club, is that we saw the biggest gains, in the bigger muscles of the body, with the overspeed training. We still saw it, benefit to hand and arm speed, but we really felt like there was more that we could do there. And I think the SuperSpeed C really took that to the next level, and we really see it. I see a couple questions in here. Tyler already answered that one about using the C club and the 3-club system together. We do highly recommend that, but it's exactly what he said. 2 days a week overspeed training, 1 day a week with the C club. Now, if you've been doing the overspeed training for a long time, like say you've been doing overspeed training for 2 or 3 years, you're in that 3rd training cycle, it would also be fine to just do the C training for a 10-week period as well. But if you're starting out, from scratch with both, that's where you would want to start.
I think too, Mike, just real quick, when you were to jump into that maintenance phase, I think it would be very appropriate in that maintenance phase, if you were using both of them, to do 1 day with the 3-club system and 1 day with the C club, since they are targeting some different things. And I don't think that would overstress the system, but would give a good maintenance. You could potentially even maybe do those on the same day in a morning or evening or something like that.
Yeah, completely agree. And I see another question there too. Everybody, all of this information is on our website. So if you just go to superspeedgolf.com and click on the training link, it'll take you actually to a new kind of training microsite that we built. So that has all of our training content, has walkthrough videos of every one of these protocols. It has everything. So if you go there and check that out, you'll have no problem finding all of the information that you need on how to get into these protocols and do them.
I think, Mike, too, another question that I think we've heard a lot of, and that I've even seen in here pop up in the chat, is just as it relates to, hey, I've been a SuperSpeed user for a year or 6 months or a lot of years. What do I do? Where do I go if I'm, was in level 4? Do I go back to level 1? Do I go back to level 2? Where should I jump into that? And I think it's important to note that, yes, we've tweaked the protocols, we've changed some things that we think are going to make it better, but it's not like this is this crazy overhaul where you're going to start doing the system and be like, man, this is groundbreakingly different than before. It's just tweaking and fine tuning some things. And so I honestly think the answer to that question is, I don't know if you can go wrong with any answer in terms of where you're going to jump back. I think for sure, if you've done over 15 weeks of speed training already, there'd be nothing wrong with you bypassing that first primary training phase and maintenance phase and just going right into the ramp up of the second one. Yeah. I also don't think there'd be anything wrong with you just going back to the start and revisiting some of those drill positions of that first level protocol. I think the drill positions and some of those foundation level 1, level 2, and level 3, they just are doing so many good things in terms of sequencing of the ground reaction force, sequencing of the kinematic sequence. And I've seen that in my lab with kind of data we're doing. And so again, if you can mentally handle it, which I think is a key component, if you can jump back to that level 1 and just gear up and try these the way they're set up, I think you'd have some great effects.
Yep, I agree. Kyle, do you want to go ahead and start hammering us with some of the questions?
You got it. Thanks for all the questions, everyone. If you could put them more in the Q&A instead of the chat. Don't have to retype them in the chat, though. If you already did that, I will get to those too. So on the theme of combining things, we also have the new force pedal protocols. So we have several users out there thinking about it or already have purchased those. If you guys could give a little more information as to how to best incorporate those, as well as if we're getting a lot of fitness questions. Where do they put in their fitness compared to all these other various speed training regimens?
Absolutely. So the force pedal protocol that we released a few months ago, it's really a protocol that's more focused on the mechanics of how the player uses the ground. So you're perfectly fine to do the force pedal protocol right alongside your normal speed training. So think of that force pedal protocol as part of your mechanics practice program, not as part of your speed training practice program. And that kind of segues into the physical side too, because you can think of your, gym, your strength, mobility, functional movement program. That's a different program than your speed training program as well. Now, all of those programs may have a positive effect on your speed and your golf swing, but they're very different training. So I think you can do all of those simultaneously. In fact, I think that would be optimal. Just making sure that you're always doing speed training when you're not tired and you're fresh and you're ready to go and you can really max it out. The other trainings you can do, maybe after a round, or those are a little bit less. You wouldn't have to be 100% maxing out speed every time to get the biggest benefits there, because those are working on different components of your body.
And I think, Mike, that even then, just to tie on that in terms of the difference between training mechanics and training speed, both of them are going to be beneficial to your speed. And we've seen some cool things where the speed training has actually improved mechanics and ball striking. But I think as you described, the force pedals being more mechanically based, that'd be something that would be so easy to do, paired in and work on the location of where you're applying that force as opposed to the magnitude of it. Which I think, again, is a different feature. So I think that's a great way to look at it.
Yep.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. How about if someone is working through mechanical changes, or what do they need to be focusing on with their mechanics as they're going through the various protocols? Is it going to affect it? Can they just completely let those go and go for max? A little bit of information there would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, every player is going to be a little bit different. I think it's important to note that if your face control or ball control skills are a 2 out of 10 when you start speed training, when you're done with speed training and you've gained 5 or 6 miles an hour, you're still going to be a 2 out of 10 in face control. So it's not like a magic pill to fix everything in your golf game. However, I will say that as you become more confident and consistent, going through these speed training regimens, a lot of times it does have a positive effect on the efficiency of the way your body's moving. And that efficiency can create more repeatable motion, can create more consistency. So those things are important. As a golf coach, I would always recommend that players, whether you have a specific mechanical program that you're working on at the time or not, you should always have, a, ball flight control program, ball, trying to hit different ball flights, trying to really understand what different feels are going to do to create different ball flights. Those type of training protocols, programs I would have in place for a player all the time, regardless of if they're actively going through a speed training session or not. So I think you definitely can keep working on your mechanics programs. Just make sure that when you're in the speed training side, the focus is only about going as fast as you can. Don't let the mechanics slow you down. And then I think that can work hand in hand as you get back to the mechanics program. You need to make sure that you're comfortable, producing those new mechanics of your swing at maximum velocity, because that's what you're going to be doing out on the golf course. So I think that's, kind of a big overview there. But yeah, it's certainly important to be doing skill-based type work at the same time of working on speed.
Okay, great. Next question. We've got a lot asking about senior type of training, talking about what our data shows for that subset of the population. Should they be doing anything differently? How to properly size there? And then any concerns for injury risk as well with that population?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, our like senior population is probably the one that gets the biggest gains from super speed golf. So that, I like to think of it this way. If you're a player that has lost speed for one reason or another, and what we know is that your body was capable of producing more speed at some point. A lot of time that can be neurological limiters that are put in, that for whatever reason your brain is put in place, like putting a governor on the engine. So those players can see huge results from speed training. So yeah, absolutely get in there. As far as picking the right set, it's more based on what type of driver you play. So if you're playing one of those ultralight type drivers, senior flex shafts, those type of things, 55 gram shafts, the senior set is going to be better there. Also, if you're a player that's like under about 85 miles an hour, we recommend starting with that senior set, just because we want to be able to make those move as fast as we can at that point. As far as injury risk goes, we haven't seen anything significantly different in that population than any other. The only thing I would say is that you don't want to do speed training if you're in pain. So if you are a player that's actively hurting after you play golf or hit balls, probably not the best idea to start a speed training regimen until you've fixed those issues that are causing pain in the system, because pain is the number one thing that is going to slow you down. I mean, you're not going to be able to max out your swing speed if it hurts to do so. So I think that's very important. But because everything is like practice swings, air swings with super speed, it's actually a lot less pressure on your body than it is to just go hit balls or play golf. So we do find that it's very effective for that community. Just again, make sure you're not in pain.
And I will add to that, Mike. One of the first things I did was collected just some survey details of current super speed users. And when we looked at pain seemed to be at least closely tied with those individuals who did not do the warm up. And so I think this is true for everyone, regardless of age. Taking that warm up really seriously. We don't want you to be fatigued when you start this, but you do have to get that body prepped for these speeds. So making sure you go through that warm up, treat it seriously, do all the exercises, all the reps for that to prep your body, because in that survey, those who reported pain did not do the warm up. So
we also did just launch 2 new warm up protocols on the training site as well. So there's also some additional warm up programs to go through that are really effective. So yeah, check all that out on the website.
All right, a few more questions about if they miss a week during a non-maintenance phase, where should they start if they're coming back from a break? Say they miss a week or two, a little more specifics there would be very helpful.
Best case scenario during a primary training phase is that you don't miss a week. But I would say if you do miss a week during one of those, then I would just pick up where you left off in that primary training phase and keep going. Tyler, would you say the same thing there?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I'm doing some research right now on some different training kind of drill positions and things like that. And I've had a few that have done that, and that's kind of what I've told them. Hey, we're just going to increase the length of time of this. And the only concern would be if like you missed week 7, I think. And like, then you just did like 2 or 7 and 8, and then you just jumped right into that maintenance phase. I would hate for you to miss out on the continuous point. I think your first answer of, man, try your best not to miss, but at 1 week, just jump in and keep rolling, right?
Yep.
All right. Perfect. A couple more questions on the fitness aspect. So I think we have a lot of just golf enthusiasts that want to do everything they can to get better. They're looking for if there's recommendations for some type of base level of fitness and training. I think this would be a great one for you, Tyler, and maybe some of the things that they can focus on, or do they really need that before they start speed training? See what you can do on that type of topic.
Let me jump in on that just real. I mean, we designed this system to be able to safely do it kind of regardless of fitness level, as long as you're not in pain. So I would say that it's safe to do it regardless. Now, beyond that, I think it's really important that especially if you're trying to really max out all of the different aspects, you know, the physical side done simultaneously with speed training, I think can produce much better results, or even better results than if you were just doing the overspeed training alone. Tyler, you want to?
Yeah, no, I think that is a great point, right? I think it all depends on what your outcome wants to be, right? If you're someone who's not doing anything in the gym right now, I don't think it's necessary to have this 18-week, strength training program where you're putting, on 5 pounds of muscle to your body before you start the system. I think you start the training, you're going to see some great benefits, and I don't think there's an increased risk of injury because of that. But my thought with this, I always go back to my study days of looking at this idea of the force velocity curve, meaning I can apply high force really slowly or lower force really quickly. And typically what's happened, especially as we age, we don't do very much low force, high velocity movements. And so I think so many people can benefit from these low force, high velocity movements. But as Mike suggested, I think adding that strength component is huge. Though I will say, I think there are some risks there to get into that overtraining type cycle where you like Mike described, will less is more, meaning I'm going to do 5 days of strength training in the gym and 4 days of speed training. You're not going to see the same benefits as if you maybe had a 3 to 3 day split or something like that.
And I think everybody's different too. So it depends on your level of experience with how much you've done in the gym before. It depends. Those programs are much more personalized than on the speed training side. Everyone's going to have slightly different deficiencies and things they need to work on. So that's one of the reasons we've shied away from ever recommending specific physical programs to go alongside our program, is that everyone's going to need a slightly different thing on that end. The speed training protocols are a lot more universal.
And just for a note that everyone hasn't seen this, if you're looking for the new training protocols, you can visit superspeedgolf.com, click on the training section, and then go ahead and register for a free account, and everything is available there for you, either to print off as a PDF, all the training cycles are on there, as well as the videos. Okay, next question. I have some that here out in the industry, other people doing various things with the SuperSpeed products, a little bit different than what we recommend. One would like to know about training heavy to light versus light to heavy, and why we have ours organized that way.
Yeah, so the heavier side of it, if you do that alone, can have some big impact on some of the sequencing mechanics for the player. So you can see a gain there. But the thing that I would say about that is that if you do the heavy club first, you're always going to swing that slower than your normal swing speed if you haven't done the other part first. We always go light to heavy because, again, this is very pure speed training. And if we're not moving faster than our normal golf swing, we wouldn't even consider it speed training. Now, again, we might get benefit in how we use the ground, or benefit in how we sequence from doing other types of drills, or even doing heavy club drills. And that could have a positive impact for the player. But again, in our opinion, it's not pure speed training, because those swings wouldn't be as fast as their normal club speed. So we're trying to get the brain used to and expecting the fastest possible swing speed that we can. And we do that by using the light clubs first, and then progressing into that heavy club, where we're still usually seeing a player swing, 10 to 12% faster than their normal club speed, even with the heavy club during the training protocols. So that's why we always go light to heavy in speed training. That's not to say that there aren't other benefits that you could use just the red club by itself to get some, some sequencing drills or things. There's other products out there that do a great job doing that as well. But it wouldn't be purist on the speed training side.
Perfect. Some more questions just on how the protocols are structured. So one is once you reach the highest level, say in the 3 club set or the C club, do you stay on that cycle indefinitely? And then another one, are the 4 weeks of maintenance necessary? Can they just jump all through 5 levels back to back to back, or do they need to actually take that maintenance phase?
I mean, our opinion is pretty strong based on some data at this point that the maintenance phase will help you get bigger gains in the next training cycle. So giving yourself some time to rest, recuperate, get, kind of out of that 3 day a week cycle is definitely a benefit. So highly recommend that. As far, sorry, what was the other part of the question?
I had a thought
Go
actually,
ahead.
Mike, on that other one, just because one of the things I first did when I started working with SuperSpeed and collecting some data for him is I started going through the speed training myself. And part of that was a little bit selfish because I was a guy that was always the shortest driver in my group. And so I wanted to get faster. But as I've now been doing it for over a year now, to that question about, well, what do we do when we get to the end, to level 5? Well, I think what happens here is first, if you're doing those appropriate maintenance phases and maybe even stretch them out during a golf season, it might be a lot of years before you get to the end of that level 5, right? Now, granted, if you're someone who just does the 4 weeks or the 3 weeks and kind of moves your way through, what I'd like to do with my own training that I think is really helpful, there are the drills that I feel like have helped me the most in terms of gaining speed. And so what I've really kind of tried to do myself is jump in and say, hey, is there are these the drill positions that I like the most, that I feel like help me generate the very most speed? And I've kind of put together some of those things and gone back and said, hey, I'm going to jump into level 2 and level 3 for these 10 weeks and then maintain for a little while. And I think if you are invested enough to get to the very end, you probably have a good feel for what you like and what your body's responding to really well. And I would almost suggest going back and just, doing some of those things again.
Great, Tyler. Can you also expand a little bit more on the periodization and the rest periods, the specifics you saw? So are we firm on the 3 days a week with that day off in between? What about 2 days on, 1 day off? As well as, what you really saw when we added that 60 to 90-second break.
Yeah, those are great questions, Kyle. And I think when we look at this, this type of neuromuscular speed training, I've never finished speed training and the next day not been able to walk down my stairs. But there's been plenty of days I've done, deadlifts and I've struggled walking down my stairs. And just because you're not feeling that kind of pain or soreness, it doesn't mean that it's not there. It doesn't mean that there's not that fatigue there. And so I think when we look at this periodization, there's just too much good research out there on this speed training. And the important in other sports, I should say, we're getting better at it in golf, and I hope to add to that. But I think in other sports, giving yourself that full day rest, I think, is really important. I think that maintenance phase is really important. I think when you look at whether it's elite level athletes or recreational athletes, it's pretty tough to go full bore, every day or day after day after day for a long time period without overtraining or introducing injury. And so I think that day of rest is really important. I think give yourself that maintenance phase and watch that as your body gets a little more fresh, you're going to be able to really hit that next speed level or that primary training phase level and really see those speed gains. And I think the last part was that 60 to 90-second rest. Again, I'd been training in the gym a lot. I've been doing the speed training a lot. I thought surely, these other people might not, or they might benefit from 60 seconds off, but there's no way I would benefit. I've been doing this speed training for 24 weeks and been training my whole life. There's going to be no benefit to me. And when I myself introduce those 60 to 90-second rests, my speeds jump on the Red Club really 7 to 8 miles per hour. So I think just because you can't feel it, that fatigue doesn't mean it's not there. And we've just seen it over and over again. And that's why we built these protocols the way they're set up.
Perfect. Mike, for you, they're wondering what club is best to use for the force pedal protocols. And then also, can you just, we have a lot of people that purchased both the C Club and the 3 Club set at the same time here recently. And just want to reiterate kind of where it's best for them to go.
Yeah, so as far as the force pedal protocol goes, really any of the clubs are going to be fine. I believe in the video we recommend the blue club just because it's kind of in the middle. If you only have the C Club, you can use the C Club during that protocol. Again, it's much more focused on where you're pushing on the ground than it is about how you're swinging the club. So any of them are going to work fine for that. As far as using the C club and the 3 club set together, again, if you're just starting, I would do 2 days out of your 3 in a week, with the 3 club set, and 1 day a week with the C club. Now, as Tyler mentioned before, if you've been doing the training for 3 years already, I think you could probably add in maybe a little bit more than that. That would be okay with the C club, but the general recommendation is going to be 2 days normal overspeed training set, 1 day with the C club.
Thanks, Mike. A few more questions here. So we're seeing some people like Bryson going full out with this and doing a lot more reps than we're recommending here. Is the less and more principle still applying to these higher level athletes? Can they get some benefits from these really intensive and long speed sessions? What are we seeing there, and how does that fit in with the general population?
Yeah, there are some very odd, I would say, outliers that you can see in the system. Like, there were a handful of like long drive professionals back in the day when we were working with some of those players. I mean, who wouldn't absolute peak out in their speed until like the 120th golf ball that they had hit in a session, which is really kind of crazy. But I would say that for the general public, for the general player, too much is definitely going to be too much, because those players also, if they did a session like that, sometimes they wouldn't be able to do another training session that week. Like, they would do one of those in 4 or 5 days, and that would be that level of fatigue. So I don't think that's really necessary. I think there's interesting case by case basis, when you're looking at a player at that level, where you can monitor some of those pieces where they actually max out their speed over the length of a session. But in general, that's going to be way too much for most players.
And I would add too, Mike, just with kind of my exercise science background, as I look at that, I mean, you kind of have some athletes that are just in a class all of their own. But the other thing that we're not seeing, I think, with guys like Bryson or these long drive guys, we're not seeing the team behind them. We're not seeing how perfectly dialed in their nutrition is, their sleep is, their other training is, their rest is, their therapy is. And most of our users don't have that kind of team behind them. And so, I think for, like you said, for the vast majority of our population, it's going to work great. Less is more. And we're seeing is Bryson just swinging lights out on these videos, and we're not seeing the rest and recovery he's doing with the teams he has, and the equipment that he has to promote that rest and recovery that we just don't have access to.
Right.
Great. There's some people that are wondering, maybe why they're not getting the best results. Are they leaking speed in certain areas? They may be struggling with the drills. I'm not sure if they're doing them right. Should they incorporate video? We recently put up a video on our YouTube page called "Why Am I Not Gaining Speed?" If you guys want to check that out on the official SuperSpeed Golf YouTube page. But Mike, maybe you can speak to that as to kind of what they need to be focusing on some of these drills. Is there a way that they can get a little more feedback that way to make sure they're doing everything correctly?
Yeah, I mean, the number one biggest problem that people have is they just aren't doing the training aggressively enough. They're too worried about, positional type issues with the golf swing, or, they're not getting outside the box to let themselves be more athletic and really let that club max it out during the training. I mean, that's the number one reason there. Beyond that, there's so many different aspects, and everybody's a little bit different. Sometimes it takes a little longer for some people to start seeing big gains, just depending on the way their swing is. But again, I think a lot of it is just becoming comfortable and confident, moving the club a lot faster and more athletically.
I would add there too, Mike, just I would want to make sure, especially for our users who are getting a little bit older, that if you feel like you've reached a plateau for whatever reason, as we've kind of described, and it could be a number of reasons, as you look at your training, I think the worst thing you can do is stop moving fast. And I think what you'll start to see is that there's a lot to be said for just maintaining the speed that we already have. And so I think continue on in the process, continue on in the programs, especially every year by year, after you pass that magic age of 40 and you start losing some of these abilities to generate these high velocity contractions, you may not see these huge speed gains, but if you weren't doing it, you might see a really large speed drop. And so in that sense, you're actually getting gains, just from not kind of regressing down towards where maybe other individuals your age would be doing that. So.
Perfect. Really great question here about if they're going for a club fitting or purchasing a new product, should they wait until they complete the first training cycle and into a maintenance phase? Great question here, Mike.
Yeah, I think when to get club fit is a big piece of a lot of this. Get yourself to a point of permanency, get into one of those maintenance phases. That'll be the best time to go get your equipment assessed and find out if you're really taking advantage of the new speed that you've gained.
Perfect. Quite a few questions about understanding how the C Club works, the science behind it. Would it cause my arms to outrace my body and my pelvis in terms of kinematic sequencing? Maybe Tyler, you start, and then Mike, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a day's biomechanics lecture type of question in terms of these things. But that counterweighted club, just that kind of that distribution of where that mass is, and to just kind of keep it simple, kind of changing some of the inertial properties of that club. And what that's doing is it's allowing your body to work in a way that it's maybe not used to, maybe placing more of an emphasis on some of those hands and some of the speeds there. Again, this is something where I've kind of started to delve into some of my research, looking at these kind of counterweighted clubs and this counterweighted training. I honestly I haven't seen anyone as of yet get in a situation where their hands start outracing their body with the SuperSpeed C Club. I think the way the drills are set up allow you to still engage that lower body a little bit as you're doing that SuperSpeed C Club training. And so again, that's just not something I've seen as of yet.
Yeah, I don't think there's any issue with it having negative impacts on the kinematic sequence. If you haven't used the C Club before, I mean, I think that question's answered a lot the first time you pick it up and you take a few swings with it. I mean, from a MOI standpoint, I mean, the C Club is actually the lightest, if you will, or least resistant club that we have in the whole set. So you can make it swing really fast, which is good. But the other thing that happens is it's like a change in resistance dynamically. So because of that counterweight, you almost get like an assist as far as allowing the club to move faster through release of the club head. And that's really where we're targeting that training. So think of it as like targeted overspeed training from about, club parallel to the ground to parallel to the ground on the other side of impact.
Great. So we have a lot of people thinking about golf season coming up, or some in warmer states that are playing right now. If they're playing and want to stick in a non-maintenance phase, is that okay? Or can you talk about, if they're a really active player, what they're looking for in terms of a periodization there, Mike?
Listen,
Yeah, I mean,
Mike and I are in Utah. We don't really want to answer questions, or I'm in Utah, he's in Colorado. We don't want to answer questions to people who have green grass and are playing golf in 70 degrees weather. So
yeah, no, I mean, look, you're fine to continue playing golf when you start a primary training phase. It's not like you can't play while you're doing that. I might not do the training right before I go out on a round because, the last time I checked, 10 yards over the green wasn't great in golf. So you will have a little bit of, right after the training, you're going to have a little bit of a difference in how far you're hitting the ball in that first few weeks. So it's more about when to do the training, but you can definitely still go play when you're in a primary phase. I would just like to get a player into one of those maintenance phases before they have like a big stretch of tournaments, or maybe like your member guest are coming up in the next few weeks. Like, I'd want to be in a maintenance phase by those points.
I will say, Mike, an interesting story from one of my first data collections I did in the summer here. And the subject came in, good player, like a scratch golfer, one handicap, and went to his men's league right after he did his first session with me. And he texted me later that night and he's like, it was great. I was hitting my drive 10, 12 yards further. He said, but then I had to dial in my irons after the first couple holes. He said the first couple were a little rough, but then I was able to dial it in, ended up firing like an even par or something. But And that just speaks to exactly what Mike's talking about.
Yeah.
Effectively, Mike, they're able to still train 3 times a week with the product if they're playing significantly during the
Yeah,
season.
absolutely.
Perfect. All right, just a couple more things. We're almost there, guys. Thanks for all the great questions. What should they expect, Mike and Tyler, if someone starts a program? There's a lot that just got their set over the holidays. What are we typically seeing for just the general population, or can we break that out a little bit more if they start the training after that 5 weeks or 10 weeks of that primary phase?
Yeah, I mean, I think across the board, it's about 5%, all age groups, all segments. I think we've tried to break it out in the past. And it's always kind of filtered back toward around that same number. So about a 5% gain in swing speed. So, I mean, if it was up to me, I mean, get after it right away, because that's going to make a big difference in your game.
Yeah, and that's what I saw in my lab too. It was about 5% of swing speed, 8 miles per hour of ball speed, and around 13, 14 yards of carry through those first 6 weeks. So
Perfect, guys. I think we're pretty good. I mean, we had just a couple more questions. If someone has some space limitations, what should they do in terms of swinging? We had a few of those people that might not have that 9-foot, 10-foot ceiling in a indoor facility or at their home.
Just get outside. I mean, heck, I live in Denver, so it can be 5 degrees here or 50 degrees in the next day. But I mean, it's no problem. Just find a place. You're only going to be doing this training where you're doing the swings for probably about 6 to 8 minutes total. So I would just say go outside and do it.
Perfect. Mike and Tyler, anything else you want to leave our audience with? I know we've answered a lot of questions there.
I think we're good. I think I'm excited for this next golf season. I think got a lot of people working on speed training. Hope to see a lot of positive things in people's games because of that. And, again, remember, we're always here. If there's anything we can do to help, please contact us through the website. Do go in and register a free account for all the training on the new training microsite. I think you'll really like all of the layout of how we have that presented. I think it's a lot easier to follow now. So we hope you enjoy that. And like I said, if there's anything else we can do to help, please let us know.
So for those who want the recording, it will be on our YouTube page tomorrow. It actually has been streaming live on Facebook, so it'll be on there right now if anyone wants to see that on our Facebook page. We will also email it to everyone that has registered, and that will go out tomorrow morning as well. If you had any other questions that didn't quite get answered, feel free to send us a message, info@superspeedgolf.com, and we'll try to help you as best as we can.
All right. Well, Kyle, thanks for moderating this. Tyler, good to see you as always.
yeah, good to be here.
I think we'll sign off at this point, and happy getting after that speed right now. Have a great evening. Bye now.
Thanks, everyone.